Hi, I'm David Henger, and today I'm going to talk a little about attitudes towards science. Now, this was an interesting data analysis project, and for all data analyses that I do, the first thing that I like to do is determine the objectives of the project. The objectives for this project were to determine the percentage of respondents in both test and control conditions who responded to the top two box options for the first three questions, and to determine if there were statistically significant differences in those percentages, and then also to determine if there are statistically significant differences in percentage of response for the top two box options by age, gender, science enthusiasm, and frequency of media use. What I did first for this study is I looked at the data, because I think that's very important, is to just get an idea of what data you're working with. And then I went through and cleaned all of the data. So I did things like remove missing data, and I converted all of the variable responses to a numeric version so they could be worked with more easily in analysis. And I also merged the two different data sets so that I could work with them in one data set, which was easier for analyses. Now the first question is, how important do you think science is overall in society? And we have 93.4% of test responses were in the top two boxes, and 76% of the control responses were in the top two boxes. And I conducted a two-sample test for equality of proportions with a 90% confidence interval, and that indicated there is no statistically significant difference between the two. And you can tell that by looking at the p-value right here, and also the confidence interval. The p-value exceeds the 0.05 cutoff, and the 90% confidence interval contains 0. The second question was, how important is the funding of science experiments or experiences? And we have, once again, 89.6 responses in the test condition versus 61.9 responses in the control condition, and these are also not significantly different. We have a confidence interval that includes 0, once again, and we have a p-value that exceeds the cutoff. Next, we have question 3, which is, how do you feel about the following statement? Making science more accessible and inclusive is essential to a functioning society. This case, the responses were once again not significantly different by test and control condition. As you can see, it's 97.1 for test and 92 for control. And the confidence interval once again includes 0 and has a p-value greater than 0.05. We then move on to the three questions and looking at them demographically. And as you can see here from the data and the charts presented, there are significant differences based on what age group people were in for all three questions. Importance of science, importance of funding science experiments, and importance of making science more accessible. Then we move on to gender. There were no significant differences between men and women in how they respond to these questions. And you can look at the p-values here and the chi-square test values. We then move on to science enthusiasm. There are significant differences in the top two responses for all three questions based on how enthusiastic people rated themselves towards science. You can look at the data here and also the output that is included in the link with the application. And then finally, we have Q1 through 3 differences by frequency of science media use. And once again, there are significant differences between all groups. Now, this might be partly driven by the fact that no one responded not at all for how frequently they used science media. But even when you don't include that category as a possible response, there are still significant differences, and that's what's reported here. Thank you so much for your time.